Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Safe House, brought to you by the SafeHouse Initiative. I'm Jeff Edwards, co-chair of the SafeHouse Initiative, and your host for today's podcast. Cyber risk management is usually linked to technical or oriented type of conversation, when in fact, it really is a business conversation that needs to be had. And fortunately, today, our guest, Rick Lemieux, is going to help us understand how we really should step back, take a look at what the risks really are. They're all business related when it comes down to it. Rick is the founder of the DVMS Institute and the executive director. And he is when I got the chance to meet him a few months ago, I started listening to him. I was like, boy, he's got to come on and be a guest with me, because he needs to share this with everybody at the Safe House Initiative. So, Rick, pleasure to have you aboard.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. I'm looking forward to today's conversation.
Yeah, me too. Hey, why don't you acquaint yourself with the audience?
Okay. As Jeff mentioned, my name is Rick Lemieux. I've been in the information technology business for over 45 years, so I've seen just about every transition you can possibly think of in terms of information technology, networking, computers, and so on and so forth. And I've been focused on helping organizations, put in place the business capabilities and the best practices to support those business capabilities, for most of that 45-year period. One of the things I've learned along the way is, that we lived in a world of technology innovation, and technology became the centerpiece of businesses. There was the technology side of the business, information technology or IT, and then there was the business side. But those two weren't really connected well. A lot of the early innovation in that area was driven around automation, giving you a way to do things quicker, faster, better, whatever the case might be. But nobody really saw, the true value of what these technological innovations brought to the business in terms of being able to provide a better product or a better customer service or a better experience for their customer or for their end users. Yeah. And so then obviously the whole world of cybersecurity kicked up, and where the internet and its capabilities opened up a whole bunch of new doors and opportunities for businesses of any size, but it also opened up a whole new set of concerns or risk that they needed to think about as part of that. And that's the journey I've been on for the past 8 years now, in helping businesses get through that situation of figuring out what risk are they being exposed to in their business, and what can they do as business owners to mitigate those risks and keep their business safe and secure for their customers in their supply chain.
So in that 8 years, Rick, what stands out to you is kind of, two or three things that you go, this seems to be the common thing that I keep hearing, or the blind spot, if you will, that people have?
Yeah, I think, it's really been interesting to witness how things have changed in the last 8 years. When I first started the journey into the cybersecurity space, we were there was a problem in the market. There was some breaches happening and small level, small scale, but you could see a trend happening where they were almost like testing the digital landscape to see how much they could get away with. And I say they, meaning those who compromise and breach our systems. And then I watched it escalate over the last 8 years to the point where it is today, where it's become a national security problem. All right. And this is true of for any size business. And I think a lot of people, you have the assumption that this won't happen to me because I'm too small for them to go after. And that is so far from the truth, because the small businesses tend to be part of a much larger supply chain. And as we've witnessed with some of the breaches that have happened, Target being a good example, where an AC vendor was the way they got in and compromised the entire Target system. So it really comes down to, the cybersecurity or cybersecurity risk management is a business problem that impacts every business on the planet. And to answer your question, once again, it's really about watching it, start out in terms of small number of breaches to where it is today, where it's become a national security, actually a global security problem that organizations need to take seriously.
In that 8 years, did you see like a hockey stick kind of effect that happened? It's like, okay, here's, in 18 or 2017, 2018, all of a sudden in 2020, 2021, around COVID time, did you see a spike happen? Or did you have a noticeable impact anywhere along that timeline?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Jeff. And yes, there was a hockey stick effect. I mean, if you think about the early days of what I'll call the first version of breaches is when someone put something on your computer and made it run slower because it was malware that just impacted the performance of your machine and either required you to buy some software from them to clean it up or basically upgrade your computer. Right. Then we started to move into the theft of intellectual property, of data, and so on. But during COVID, to your point, is when the switch went on because the entire world went digital overnight. All
Yeah.
right, because we had to in order to survive as human beings. And so, but a lot of that switchover was done with no forethought, no planning around security other than minimal. If you come in on a VPN line, which is a virtual private network that businesses use to communicate to the mothership, or you're coming in through the internet on an unsecured line, there were lots of ways people were communicating to get their day-to-day jobs done in a virtual mode. So that became, if you think about it, the attack surface of the internet grew dramatically
Yeah.
over a very short period of time. And for the bad guys, that was the best thing that could ever happen to them. They just, they got a gold mine of opportunity that they needed to take advantage of it. And for as long as the pandemic was in effect, which was a couple of years. So they had a lot of time to go in and get into systems and work their way around, figure out where the value lived in terms of data that they could collect, and so on and so forth. So that opened up a whole big window that wasn't planned for, and it gave the those who compromise systems an opportunity to do it at a much larger scale than any time in history.
You said something earlier about the small, mid-sized businesses, or people say, "Well, it'll never happen to me," and when in fact they are part of a bigger food chain, if you will, or a supply chain. Do you do you deal with a lot of SMB business owners and leaders? And if so, what do you tell them? How do you counsel them?
Yeah, the answer is yes. We deal with a lot of small to medium-sized businesses, and we're very careful about ensuring that the conversation is not about technology,
Okay.
because most small to medium-sized business customers do not understand technology. They know they have a computer, they know they have a router because it comes from the cable company or the whatever company they're getting their internet services from, and that's
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Yeah.
The rest of it's magic that they have don't understand and they have no interest in understanding because that's not their business. So when I communicate to them, I communicate to them in business terms because cybersecurity risk is a business problem, right? So if you think about it, just break a small business down, all right?
Yeah.
So businesses know what to do if they have a fire. They call the fire department, right? They know what to
Yeah.
do if they have a robbery. They call the police department. What do they do if they have a digital breach that could result in a robbery? It could result in, an impact to their customers or the theft of data, or whatever the case may be. What do? They don't even know what to do, right? They don't even know how to protect themselves for that, right? So what we really focus on teaching the SMB is what are the fundamentals of digital? So we assume
Mhm.
everyone knows what digital is, but
Yeah.
98% of people don't, including executives who run multinational companies, all right? Because that's
Mhm.
not what their world is centered around. Their world is centered around making business decisions, investment decisions. So they really don't understand this. So you need to take them into the world of digital, all right? Basically showing them that this is what digital is, this is how it operates. Here are the risks associated with digital. And in fact, if you give them this broad picture of where they could be impacted from or how they could be impacted, you can see the eyes get really big because they've never thought about it that way. Okay.
Mm.
They also need to know why every day when you fire up your computer or your phone, you're reading about another cyber attack or another successful cyber attack. All right. And
Yeah.
so they need to understand why the government is concerned about this and
Yeah.
why the government is making investments in new frameworks and new approaches to create a standardized approach to mitigating this new risk, because this new risk has not only small business, impact, but it also has national security impact as well, right? And they also need to know what is their role, and the people who work for them, what are their roles in helping mitigate this new business risk that they're facing on this cybersecurity infrastructure.
And then to document it, is that sort of what you also recommend? Start to create a plan of sorts?
Yeah, they really need to have a plan. Okay. So, and that plan involves, not only understanding, what your digital landscape is. How do you use digital as your business? Is it only for, internet orders? Is it for taking credit cards? Is it for something else, ordering supplies or whatever the case may be? So you have to see how digital fits into your business world and how much you use those capabilities to do what you need to do. Then you need to document all that, okay?
Uh-huh.
You need to understand the risk associated with each of those, right? So in other words, is my supply chain connection to the person who supplies me my pizza boxes or my dough or whatever else, my refreshments, whatever the case might be, I need to understand, what issues could I run into with that particular supplier? Is that supplier secure? Is there something beyond that I don't know about that could come back and invade my network and steal my customer data, steal my customer credit cards? And then I have all sorts of new liabilities open up because of that. Because at the end of the day, every business is responsible for their client information and all of the PII, personal identifiable information that exists with that client. So even if you become compromised through some third party, you still have some liability in it. So it's important for you to paper that up. It's also important for you to have an incident response plan, just like we talked about earlier. You have a fire, you call the fire department, police department. Who do you call, and what else can you be doing to deal with risk or compromise, or how to mitigate that risk? Okay, so you could do things like, once you have a breach, you may want to call your lawyer. You may want to call, the local authorities, who are responsible for that. And we're starting to see a lot of cities and towns set up, cyber crisis centers, all right, because they're preparing for something that could be catastrophic that would impact an area, and they need to have resources themselves set up to respond. So that's what small businesses need to be thinking about. What do they do when they have a successful breach? How do they recover from that? What can they do to mitigate that breach from happening in the first place? And maybe what could they do to mitigate the unknown risk? And that's maybe buy an insurance policy that would cover some of the losses they would experience as a result of that breach. So it's all basically tying it all together, just like you do for any other aspect of your business. It's just another thing that you need to deal with. It delivers you a lot of value, but also delivers you a lot of risk, and you need to plan for those risks just like you do for other parts of the business.
Do you find it easier to talk to business people about technical, translate technical into business, or is it easier to talk business to technical people? Because your plans would probably start with the business, here's the business implications, here's the technical bits and here's how you make the watch, but the time is this. Does that make sense, my question?
Oh God, does it ever? It's spot on, and the answer is yes in both instances. It's really hard to talk to business people in technical terms, and it's really hard to talk to technical people in business terms. It's like they're speaking different languages. Okay, so you almost need a translator in between. And I think that's the role that I've assumed, in my business, is I'm the translator. I take these really complex topics and translate them into, easy to understand, communication flows. And I always tell people the best way to address both those issues is to connect the unknown to the known. All right. So if I'm talking to a business person, I need to translate technical jargon into business terms that they'll understand and be able to comprehend and then take action on, and vice versa. When I'm coming back the other way, talking to a technical person, I help him understand the business value that is created by that technology and the services it enables, and why it's important for him to ensure that from a technological point of view, that everything has been done to ensure that that value is protected. Okay.
Hmm.
So that means doing all your upgrades and whatever else you need to do in order to deliver the outcome that the customer is expecting. So that's kind of how I do it. It's all done through translation in a way that helps people connect the unknown to the known.
Yeah, you said something about the insurance policy. I think that the insurance policy is becoming I think people are starting to realize that you really have to have an insurance policy because they do a lot of things in terms of the incident response, getting the legal counsel involved and other types of things that they can help facilitate. So, would you put that at the top of the list of things to do, or you got to get a plan in there? But how would you start to rate things if you were just saying, look, I'm going to triage where I'm at today because I have basically nothing. I'm assuming I'll never get hit, and I have 20 people that work for me, but I'm just gambling right now. What would you say to those folks?
Yeah, well, there are some fundamental things that organizations need to do in order to, I like to say, stabilize the patient. I always use my hospital analogy. All right. So
Mhm.
you've got a patient who's come into the emergency room. They're bleeding from somewhere. You need to figure out how to stop the bleeding and then figure out, okay, what caused the bleeding and is there a higher level thing that we need to be dealing with at the time? So I think, what I tell businesses today is you need to do an assessment. All right. So you can understand where you are right now because you can't start anywhere other than where you are. All right. And
Yeah.
once you understand where you are, you can determine, what is your risk levels at that point. All right. Do you have an incident response plan? If not, that's a major risk right there. Okay.
Hmm.
Have your employees been trained or at least been exposed to what your digital infrastructure is, why it's important, and
Yeah.
how can they ensure that it's protected, based on the day-to-day business operations? Okay. Do you have an insurance policy that would
Yeah.
protect you in the event that some risk were to happen, event were to happen that would cause, information to be compromised? So you at least got some coverage to sustain your business during the recovery period. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, how do you continually innovate what you're doing?
Hmm.
Because the thing people don't completely understand, and this goes back to the translation, this is not a one and done. This is not like put in this
Yeah.
button and just hit it when there's an emergency. This is a constantly evolving threat landscape. There's all sorts of new attack techniques, and they're going after the easy prey, what we call the low hanging fruit, okay, which are typically small businesses. And because they are also part of a much larger supply chain in some instances. So you really need to you continually assess your environment, ensure that what you've put in place for protection and response is
Yeah.
still working. And if not, make adjustments to it, as often as you need to, because, once again, the threat landscape isn't getting any smaller and the threat itself is getting greater.
Yeah, over the past couple of years, Rick, I've been dealing a lot with the cyber insurance industry, which is somewhat of an extension and bleeds into business interruption insurance. So the two are
Mhm.
closely tied together.
Mhm.
And I believe that, well, and through my conversations, they're saying, "Hey, we've got a $1 billion problem, but it's out overshadowed by the $1 trillion problem, which is
Mhm.
a cyber attack happens, but it's the downstream effects that take me out of business for 100 days, 200 days, 300 days. Much like the United Healthcare issue that happened, and they're still not up and operational as of the 20th of May. Yesterday, the day we're recording today is the 21st, but it's it's the $1 trillion problem that's really keeping the insurance industry up at night, and they're
Mhm.
changing the way they operate and think about how they have to do business.
Mhm.
Have you seen it from your perspective? Have you seen some of that happening?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting when I first, got into this space and really started to build the products of the DVMS Institute. Insurance was the easy way out for businesses. All right, they just bought an insurance policy. Insurance companies saw this as, the next great frontier for them. So they were writing insurance policies, without really truly understanding the risk associated with those policies. It's kind of funny when you apply for medical insurance today, they actually run your entire background through this thing called is the MEB or MIB, Medical Information Bureau. It's a building in Massachusetts with no windows where thousands of computers live with all your medical information, so they know how insurable you are or what they need to charge you based on the risk that you present them as a business. That did not exist for cyber insurance at all. People just thought, they'll throw more routers and switches and other technology at the problem and everything will be solved. And we'll just keep getting paid this premium every year and not have to pay out. Well, as you said, it's turned into a billion-dollar industry with $1 trillion payout because organizations did not do enough to mitigate the risk. So the insurance companies have figured this out. They, like, the small businesses, who need to stop the bleeding, are now looking at, doing, or at least having the customer provide a complete assessment of what you've done to understand what your risk is and what have you done to mitigate it and what are you going to do going forward. And then by having those capabilities in place, you get better insurance rates. If you don't have any of those capabilities in place, you probably won't be able to afford the insurance. So now you've got another risk because you have nothing to mitigate, the unknown risk that you can't see or know about until something happens. So it has changed quite a bit, the insurance industry, as over the last 8 years from when I first got into this business.
Yeah, and I think that when you do sit down with the executives, I had a sit down with one of the presidents of a big insurance company last week, and I said, hey, I keep hearing that cyber attacks and ransomware are the worst disasters for the digital infrastructure that exists today, except for a catastrophic event, a regional outage. And he says, yeah, I believe that's the case because it's changing how long it takes when they get in there and encrypt and hold your data hostage, how long it takes for you to recover, maybe forever. And maybe you don't ever get your data back, potentially. You have to rebuild it and you may or may not have the good backups. I mean, there's a million reasons why the cyber attack is the worst disaster that's known to date. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I agree. And one of the things I advise companies right up front, especially small businesses, because it's easier for them to do this than for larger companies, and that is have a business continuity plan. In other words, have a backup plan, right? I mean, I probably shouldn't say this since we're on the open air, but I've got terabits drive that I back up everything every day, in the event that I'm compromised and I'm out of business, because my whole business is virtual. All right. So I think it's important for businesses to have a small business to have a business continuity plan. They're affordable. Once you understand what you have and where everything lives, you can back it up. In fact, you can automate the entire process. Just ensure that you disconnect those drives once you back them up.
Yeah.
Leave them on the system and they'll just compromise those as well. The other thing you mentioned, Jeff, that I found really interesting is, once an organization is compromised and they're being held, for ransom, that data doesn't just live with one organization. They actually sell the data to other organizations so they can turn around and ransomware you the same way. So it's not like you just experience it once. You may experience it multiple times. This is exactly what happened with United Healthcare. And it's interesting if you analyze the United Healthcare scenario, there are two reasons why they were compromised. Okay, and both are business related. One is they had this two-factor authentication thing they didn't put in place. All right, so made it easy for people to get in. The second reason is they grew by acquisition. All right, very quickly. And so, they didn't really do the complete risk assessment of each of these organizations to understand whether or not they were using two-factor authentication. So these are both business decisions that they made in growing that company, and then they became compromised. And I'm sure that's true with a lot of businesses that grow, either on their own organically or through acquisition. Every time you bring something new onto your environment, it creates another threat that you need to analyze and understand. So it's really important for organizations to, have this backup capability that we talked about earlier. At least you'll be able to restore your business back to some normal state that will allow you to continue to service your customer and keep a cash flow going so you don't run into a problem, that some have run into already, and that is bankruptcy.
Yeah. Well, and there's another thing too. I've talked to a lot of incident response folks, and they said, you know, people don't think through that when they build their plans as to how to communicate, because if their email system's been compromised, they can't send emails that way. One, two, they don't have all the phone numbers because it's in the system, it's being taken over. Number two, so there's a lot of talk about these out of band communication capabilities. So you can have something independent, and it's living outside of your organization. Do you have any opinions on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's definitely, building business continuity plans, can involve either, doing it yourself, by doing what I described earlier, or working with third-party organizations that can replicate your business in a matter of minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
Should something happen, and more importantly, giving you access to that data you need to operate your business. We just take it for granted that it's there, and isn't life wonderful and things are flowing. We're highly optimized in terms of how we do business in the digital world. But once it goes away, you just sit there like, I hate to use this term, but a deer in the headlights. You just don't know what to do. And so you need to plan for all these things, especially in the day and age that we live in now.
Yeah, and I think I keep hearing a term, an old saying, really, hope for the best, but plan for the worst.
Exactly right. That's
Yeah.
true for any size business or any institution. I mean, you think about, we've kind of got, everyone personally is connected to the world digitally. All right. So you have personal responsibilities to manage that digital relationship you have with others. Okay. And if you're a parent, you have children, you have a responsibility to ensure that they understand what that means to them as well. And then if you're obviously in business, that's another whole thing in itself. And I don't care whether you're an employee of a business or whether you're the owner of that business, right? You're there working for an organization, whether it's yours or somebody else's, and you have a personal responsibility to ensure that whatever you do in the digital domain is appropriate and also protected. All right. Otherwise, you could be the way that, people get compromised in organizations, and that shuts the business down. And it doesn't only impact you because they can no longer afford to pay you, but it impacts everyone else in that organization as well. So you're in it together. You need to be working at it together. All right. And then I think, if you think about the other side of life where, we all have some spiritual component, in our lives, that's another whole thing in itself. I mean, we have to be real sensitive to that world, and there's also a lot of information being stored, in those areas as well that is personal and confidential. You don't want to share that with anyone. That's your personal thoughts, your personal feelings, and that all can be exposed as well. So it's just a kind of every aspect of life is some potential for risk that you need to make top of mind.
Well, Rick, this has been a very, very fun conversation with you, and very enlightening. If you had one final thought to leave with the audience that they could do today or tomorrow to help improve their current position, what would that be?
Well, I think, the best thing for people, especially small to medium-sized businesses, is to get themselves educated. All right.
Yeah.
Because you only know what you know. And most people in small to medium-sized businesses don't really know a lot about the digital world and its risk. All right. There's a lot of free resources out there that come from, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, as well as other organizations, that will provide you some fundamental exposure to, you could Google and get a whole bunch of videos that you can watch, or podcasts like this one here, which will give you some visibility into, what the digital world is really all about. That's where it all starts. It all starts with the baseline education.
Yep.
And then a commitment to protecting your digital business and going through the steps that we mentioned earlier, which is what we've been helping a lot of organizations do. Our goal, and this is why we love participating, in the SafeHouse Initiative, because, the small to medium-sized business world is a different business world. Even though they have the same exposure that the big businesses do, They just don't have the resources that the big businesses do. And so it's great to have these types of initiatives that will provide you, the baseline information, the education that we've been talking about, along with some tools and other capabilities that will help you get to where you need to go. So my vote is to, start with the SafeHouse Initiative and then work your way from there.
Rick, I second that vote. I tell you what, Rick, thank you so much for joining us today and all that you do to contribute to the SafeHouse Initiative. And it is very much appreciated. And so you are welcome back anytime, my friend.
Thank you, Jeff. I'd be more than happy to come on again if you need me.
A special thanks to Rick Lemieux of the DVMS for his contributions to the SafeHouse and for effectively addressing the business needs of the NIST controls. That's our podcast for today. I'm Jeff Edwards for the SafeHouse Initiative. Thanks for joining us, and remember, be safe, be resilient, and be kind to each other. For more information on the SafeHouse Initiative, please use your mobile device to scan the QR code on the screen. Send us an email at safehouseinitiative.org@gmail.com or visit us on our website, safehouseinitiative.org. We look forward to hearing from you.